that's the difference between a partner and a service provider is, again, that critical thinking, that evaluation of the uniqueness of the client, their business propositions, their challenges, their headwinds, their tailwinds, and being able to make media choices off of the analysis and the evaluation of all of those components. And that is not a one-way street. That is not something that a media partner is solely going to be able to do. That's where the relationship and that partnership, that two-way partnership with a client comes in. You're going to need those clients to be willing to explore their own value propositions.
Welcome to Contrary to Popular Opinion, a podcast hosted by Vujade Digital. In each episode, we bring you provocative topics and novel perspectives around leadership, business, and marketing that defy the norms because exponential growth demands unconventional thinking and visionary action. So open your mind and let's get into this week's episode.
Hey everybody, it's Todd Juno.
I'm Kelly McGuire, co-founder of Vujade Digital. Excited to talk about today's subject.
So today I want to talk about a topic that you and I stumbled into while we were walking down the streets of London, England, together, fortunately enough to be there for the Arsenal game. And you made a comment to me when we were talking about our jobs and our career and what we do. And I think we were just talking about it in this sort of bigger picture discussion, but you made this comment that just stuck to me like, I don't know, concrete, that our job as a media agency and part of the whole role of media planning and buying is to put an ad, and this is largely digital, put an ad in front of somebody, an ad impression in front of somebody that largely is just there to buy 3 to 5 seconds of their time and attention. That just sort of profoundly hit me. And I say, that's right. Our job is to try and acquire 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds of somebody's time and attention. And an incredibly crowded, fragmented, disheveled, stressful world, we are investing dollars simply to try and acquire a few seconds of a consumer's mind to influence them to accept our client's product into their life, for one reason or another, maybe try it, whatever that is, right? It could be a software as a service, or it could be a sweet tea. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the role of media. And ideally, at the end of the day, its job is to do more than that. But I think when brands hire agencies, especially media agencies, and media agencies do work for their clients, I don't know that everybody is thinking of it bigger than that. I think they're thinking of media's role as 3 to 5 seconds of somebody's time. Take it from there and sort of tell me like where was that idea coming from, and like where does it lead you to now that you've had a couple of weeks to stew on that since we first talked about this? It opened this dialogue between you and I.
Yeah, I think it's built around a lot of stuff that we've talked about and the process that we engage with prospects and clients and the way people think about what it is that we're doing and the difference between a service and a partnership and what we are capable of achieving and what's unrealistic expectations. And where that idea around, when you boil down the purchasing of media, I try and think about fundamentals first. And the idea behind it was we have the ability to spend a little bit of money to win an auction, to generate an impression of some kind in front of someone. And again, you're going to get anywhere from 3 to 5 to 10 seconds or so of a message in front of somebody. Now, from that very, very basic concept, there's all kinds of layer of consideration that gets added on top of that. Everything from what is the message you're going to put in front of them, to who's going to see it, to the ad format, to time of day and targeting and sequential messaging and what you expect them to do when they see it. And there's all, this whole thing. But again, it boils back into the starting point of I'm going to spend a couple of cents, if you really break it down to an individual impression, to capture someone who's scrolling through Facebook or watching a streaming television program or on a website or in an app. And my hope is that auction that I'm winning is an ad that is going to generate some attention. They're going to stop scrolling, or they're going to look at their screen while they wait for their show to come back on, or they're going to notice the banner at the bottom. So once you really start like, okay, I have invested in this opportunity to communicate with someone. Now you think about the details around maximizing the value of that investment. Have I invested the money to get time in front of the right person? Is it someone who might actually need my service or buy my product or have that need? Have I done the work to understand that? And let's assume the answer is yes. Now I have to make sure that, okay, I've reached someone who might buy my product. I've put one in auction where I might actually get them to pay attention to it. Now I've got to make sure, do I have the right thing to say to them? Do I understand the person I've served this ad to well enough to know what I need to say about my product to get them to pay attention, to care, and to actually believe what I have to say? And again, that can be segmented by who they are or what groups they're into, where they're at in their purchase cycle, all of these types of things. And then you try and think through, okay, let's say I've accomplished that. I've served the right message to someone who might buy my product, and I've given them something they're actually going to pay attention to. Have I laid out the journey that easily allows them to take whatever action I now want them to take? Do I simply want them to remember the name of my brand? Do I want them to click on my ad? Do I want them to buy it? Do I expect them to go research it or ask their friends about it? And again, this kind of gets built out further and further and further. But the idea is all of it boils down to you're investing in a few seconds of time in front of someone to accomplish something. And once you sort of build off of that, you can start to answer questions that create validation points of, are you doing the right thing and the best thing you can with that investment? And I sometimes think that journey gets lost a little bit when you kind of jump right into, I'm buying a bunch of Facebook ads, or I'm buying a bunch of search ads, or I'm buying a bunch of streaming TV ads, and you're just trying to get volume and metrics and numbers. And the simplicity of what you're trying to do and the details of each component that goes into doing it the best way possible, I think, it's the forest for the trees a little bit that gets lost, where everyone starts right at the bigger picture of the outcomes versus what am I actually going to achieve from it? And most importantly, do I have all of the right pieces that I need to put this puzzle together to maximize this investment to make sure when I spend those dollars, I'm going to get the results I want? Or am I just throwing money to spend budget, to earn fee, to get these types of things because it's what I'm asked to do? I've been asked to buy ads as a service, and I'm going to do that. Again, versus have I really thought through what is the best thing to do? Am I ready to buy these ads? Do I have the journey built out? Do I have the credibility as a brand to say something that someone's going to believe? Or do I need to work on that? Do I need to, invest in collaborations and influencers and other things that validate my story? Will anyone listen to me? And this has come to light a little bit more when I've thought about the Amazon journey. We've had people who have asked us, hey, I want to start a direct-to-consumer website and get people to buy it. And we'll look at it and be like, well, all your competition's on Amazon, and people already have their credit card information and they're already shopping on Amazon. They're just going to add that product to the cart. Yet you expect them to not go to Amazon, go to your brand new website for a product they've never heard of, add their credit card from scratch and buy your product instead. Like you've made your process 20 times harder than your closest competitor, and your differentiating value proposition is barely anything different than what they can do there. Like, we're not miracle workers. Like, we can only do so much.
Yeah. So I guess this is what bugs me about the industry we're in. And so if anyone listens to this that's in our industry, this is what bugs me about our industry. And that could be the CMO, the CEO, or an agency person. I don't understand why all this stuff is generally decoupled. Why is the idea of the brand and the value proposition and the creative and the message to be said to some consumer about their product or service solving some problem or enhancing some part of their life generally so decoupled from the distribution outlet of that creative and message, which is the media? I don't understand why all those things aren't thought about together at the table at the same time, when so often, and I do see improvement. I see this changing where the media distribution side of the equation isn't sort of the last part of the supply chain of marketing. It's not the last thing. It's now we're starting to see it move up that sort of maybe the tables at the chairs at the table closer to the orientation of the discussion in the beginning. But again, we're just a distribution platform. We distribute a message, but there's all these other pieces that are going to, I think, have something to do with whether or not that message distribution is successful. Yet in our experience, media is the first thing to be commoditized and beaten down on price, as if that's going to help the brand get better media if they just beat you down on fee. I don't know where that logic comes from yet. I still haven't figured that out in my career. And I don't understand why it's believed that if the campaign didn't work, generally the finger gets pointed at media. It gets pointed at distribution. Nobody thinks about the creation of the product. Like you said, if you're a tea brand that just entered the market of teas and beverages, which we have a client that did that, what's different? Well, it just so happens that this particular brand has a uniquely new ingredient that is first to market. Okay, they can claim a value prop that's different. And they can claim that the taste is different and the nutritional value is different and all these things, right? To your point, they didn't just launch another tea that's on par with all the other teas that are out there and just say, buy ours. We're going to spend $1 billion on media to tell everyone to just buy our product. And if it doesn't work, the media agency must have messed up. So I don't get where distribution of value proposition and creative and messaging is lost in the discussion. Why is it such a difficult thing to focus on? The distribution of the message should be at the forefront in a lot of ways, right? It should be defining what should be said, where it's going to be said.
In an ideal world, yeah. I mean, I think there's different approaches to it, right? There's top down and there's bottom up. There's tonnage effect versus that laser focus. And yeah, I mean, look, we joked around that if you're a huge company with really big budgets, you can afford to just throw everything out there, just make awareness, and you're going to catch so much in that net that you're going to get the results that you want. But if you don't have the ability to have that tonnage effect, you have to start to look at that laser focus and that very specific approach and answering all those questions in a very strategic way. You need to be able to understand what you have the capability of achieving and being able to structure things that way. I mean, honestly, I think when it comes to the fee question and why it tends to be a race to the bottom, or we've used this term before, a lot of people look at it as a zero-sum game where you're either buying media or you're not. There's not a lot of spectrum or motion in between that, which we fundamentally disagree with, because I think you're not necessarily paying, or you shouldn't be paying, for the action of buying media. That should be the end of a process. I think what you're really paying for, and where the spectrum comes into play and where you get this concept of partner versus service provider, is you're paying for the critical thinking. You're paying for the creativity. You're paying for the passion and the care and the analysis and the pivoting and the adjustments, and really thinking about the real holistic journey of the people that media is meant to impact and affect, right? If you simply want someone to log into the Facebook interface and put in some targeting and load up some ads and then report, here's your impressions and here's what the platform says, you can do that. And maybe that won't cost you a very big fee. And maybe if you've nailed your product and you've built something that doesn't have a lot of competition, doesn't need a lot of education, and people are ready to buy, that will work beautifully. But if you have a product or a service that has high competition, needs some education, you mentioned the tea brand that we work with, it's an incredible product. It's an incredible new ingredient, but it requires a lot of explanation and education and validation and learning. This is something where people have been promised brand new miracle ingredients forever and all these other things, and they have skepticism. And so part of the media and marketing is to manage someone's journey and address their concerns and know that sort of understanding from, I just heard about this for the first time, to I'm ready to put my credit card in and buy it. There's a lot that happens between those two things if you're not a very simple impulse purchase, or you haven't revolutionized something that doesn't have competition. So I think that's what it comes down to, is when we talk about you're buying 3 to 5 seconds or 10 seconds of someone's time, again, it's all of that critical thinking and that understanding and that structuring and that experience that goes into all of the things that can go right or wrong in that journey. Does someone know the best practices? Does someone have the relationships with the platforms? Have you analyzed what you could do, what you should do, or what's next? Have you laid all of this out? Are you collecting the data to validate hypotheses that led to the decisions you've made? Have you critically looked at the entire ecosystem and chose where to start and where to grow to? Is it a constant evolution? Because that media plan that you start with is definitely not the one you should be running after a few weeks or a few months of data, because nothing's going to go 100% as you expected it from day one. That nimbleness and that ability to know where to go. So I think, to me, that's the difference between a partner and a service provider is, again, that critical thinking, that evaluation of the uniqueness of the client, their business propositions, their challenges, their headwinds, their tailwinds, and being able to make media choices off of the analysis and the evaluation of all of those components. And that is not a one-way street. That is not something that a media partner is solely going to be able to do. That's where the relationship and that partnership, that two-way partnership with a client comes in. You're going to need those clients to be willing to explore their own value propositions, to think about the things that they believe, but maybe the market isn't accepting, to bring third-party partnerships and validation when, maybe their product or their brand doesn't have the authenticity to solely be the ones conveying this. So that's that give and take, and that's that partnership component of it, where again, it's media is the end of the road, and it is a very simple end of the road, but there's so much that has to go into it, and the time and the energy and the expertise and the experience where you get what you pay for becomes very, very true.
Well, so I'm laughing because there's two things that you just said. One, you said we shouldn't be paid for buying media. And I'm pretty sure every media agency in the country to date has been paid for buying media, which I love the fact that you said that, because I think you couldn't be more right. That's the least valuable thing that we do in a long line of things. Once we get to that point, it's experts using software, yes. So there is expertise required there, but I think there's a lot more that goes into it up front. And the second thing you said is that when we create a media plan, we should no longer be using that plan 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks into launching it. And I wonder how many media people out there, if they hear this, might choke at hearing that, wait, I spent all this time building a media plan and you're telling me it's irrelevant after 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And that is coupled with or linked to the idea that you shouldn't be paying us to buy media. What you should be paying us for is critical thinking and business acumen that goes into understanding the distribution of a message in order to influence the consumer to take some action. Media buying happens to just be the outlet of that, right? The software execution of that mental sort of mind mapping of a solution. The software execution piece is sort of at the tail end of that. And I don't think marketing people think that way about media. And I don't think our peers in the media industry, which I would challenge them and ask them to rethink how they go to market. And I'm saying this to every media agency owner or media director or whatever out there, stop and challenge your thinking. Conventional wisdom says that we're a heck of a lot more than just buying an ad impression in an auction, bidding on an auction, raising your hand saying, I want to win this impression and I'm going to try to win it over somebody else. Man, our jobs are so much more than that. But yet they get whittled down to that level of simplicity, I think it feels like in a lot of cases. So I'll just bring it back around to what you said. The moment you said that's our job, it just stuck, right? Because that is this place that we find ourselves, and brands are trying to win these wars of growth and scale. And it's just one piece of a long line of things that they have to win at.
Yeah, it's a really weird disconnect that happens, right? Because a lot of this goes with the type of client you are, the industry that you're in, the size of budgets that you have. It's an odd thing. The bigger your budgets, the more room you have to fail, or the more room you have to be experimental. And when I say big budgets, I'm talking your 50, 100, billion-dollar budgets. Yes, you can afford to do Red Bull-like events that can be very brand awareness. And when you have those things, and there's so much that drives the thinking and the consideration of the industry, Whereas someone who has a couple $1 million a year, just they can't afford to take those swings and misses, and they really need to be more mindful about it and have that thinking in it. But it becomes really interesting when you think about percentage of media fees. They scale with the size of money that you're managing, right? And so if you have a couple percentage points, if you're 8, 9, 10% on a $50, $100 million budget, that hard dollars that translates to is very different than even 20, 30% of a $5 million budget, right? You're talking hundreds of thousands of millions versus millions and tens of millions, even though the percentages don't really change in that. And what that translates to and what you get off of that and what you can do with that and the swings you can take and the experiments that you can take, the math changes so dramatically, but it's not really thought about that, right? It's like, oh, well, someone's going to offer me 10% of my media as my management fee. But again, 10% of 5 million versus even 10 million, right? Like just doubling the budget on that. That's double the amount of money on there when you talk about it. And just think about what that translates in terms of times and hours and, efficiency and where you grow. And then, you go with scaled budgets and yes, the math works out, but then you actually should be doing more work because you should be opening up new avenues and managing new things and trialing it. I think it all boils down to, I think some of that detail gets lost in the overall thinking. I think there's just this simple rinse and repeat blueprint thinking that says, well, I'm going to hire an agency that has this experience in this field, has these credentials, has told me some things that I like to hear, and I'm going to trust that it's going to go forward. But you need to make sure you have someone that's going to dive in, lock arms with you, ask the hard questions, not work for you just to not get fired, but actually work for you to achieve something. And ideally have linked motivation with you, right? Have upside, sharing that upside, and maybe sharing some of the downside, maybe scaling out what they make if they're not achieving it, but also not just throwing up their arms and being like, well, we're doing our job, or we're buying all these brand terms and it's working. I don't know why your bottom line's not moving, but really being able to link those and critically say, hey, I like my paid media metrics. You're telling me your business isn't reacting accordingly. Rather than saying, well, it's not on me, it's on you. That should be motivated. Let's figure out why. Are we not buying incrementality? Are we not looking at the right things? Are we missing opportunities? And again, it's just that partnership and that relationship and the way it's structured and what goes into it. And again, very few of this. The answer to challenging media questions is almost never, let's just buy more media the same way we're doing it. But that tends to be the answer a lot of the time. Like, let's just buy more media. Let's just spend more dollars on it versus let's understand what we're doing and critically evaluate what's falling short. We believe most people aren't going to buy something they didn't think would work. They had some reason to believe it would work. Let's dive in and say, what did we think should have happened? And where has it sort of fallen off the rails? Has the creative missed? Is the landing page too complicated? Is the targeting valid? Do we not have the right viewability? Are we seeing impressions that it says are being served but aren't necessarily being shown right? Is it misaligned with content? Is there some competitor undercutting our price by 20%? There's all these kinds of things that, again, that's the critical thinking and the analysis that makes the difference. If all you need is more Facebook ads or more search ads, then, why would you even hire an agency for that? Just hire someone in-house to just do that if it's that simple and you don't need all the extra expertise and knowledge and relationships that make things great.
Yeah, that's the interesting statement, right? If it was just about buying media, I'd rather pay a salary to a couple of people and let them buy a ton of media and not pay a big fee. So clearly brands don't think it's just that easy because they hire agencies to do the work for them, but then they don't like to pay the fee, which doesn't usually pan out in their favor if they sort of shortchange their agency to get, again, the thought leadership, the critical thinking, those kinds of things. So I have a question for you then. If I'm the CMO of a company and instead of me looking for an agency, you were looking for a brand to represent, what do you think some of the most challenging, hard-hitting, controversial, tough to answer, sort of come to Jesus questions would you think is something that the CMO needs to be asked when they're thinking about I need an agency. I want to market my brand, or I've had agencies. I'm on my fifth one. I want to market my brand. I'm not growing. I need to scale. People need to buy my product. Why aren't people buying my product? I wonder if you flip the coin, right? And agencies were out there going after brands, and almost like we were sending the RFP to CMOs to say, if you wanted to work with us, you need to answer our questions. Can you think of any on the spot that might be really, really sort of hard hitting that you would ask or CMO, or maybe not even a question, maybe a statement of fact to say, if you're going to do X, you must consider or you must do Y? Can you think of anything off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're leading because you know I do, because this is part of the process that we actually do engage when we talk about customers, because we are not a huge agency and we have to be mindful about who we take in, and we take risks with certain clients, and we need to make sure they're bets that we're willing to take. And so those hard hitting questions is, we need to know that clients are prepared to take advantage of our value proposition, right? If we're being hired just to buy media, I'm not saying I wouldn't take that deal, but I don't know that that's really flexing our muscles and really taking advantage of what we have to offer, right? So from the selective process, one of the first things that I tend to ask clients is, why would someone buy your product? It's a very simple question and you'd be surprised at the spectrum of answers. But yeah, it starts with, why would I buy your service? And then it kind of goes from there on, what sets you apart from your competitors? If I was a customer and I was evaluating you versus your next three options that solve my problem, what stands out about you? What differentiates? What matters? And then it's, how have you built stories to convey that messaging? What is the journey to conversion? And is it harder or easier than where other people are going to be? Why should I believe what you have to say? Do you have any validation or proof or backing up of it? Is there any momentum that exists that can be drafted off of and boosted and supportive? Or are we basically starting from scratch and creating our own wind here?
But wait, let me interject. We're a media agency. What business, what right do we have to ask those kinds of questions for a media agency, right? This is sort of where I'm trying to think about the bigger picture. We're a media agency. Normally, we wouldn't be asking those kinds of questions. We'd be asking other kinds of questions.
We're being challenged and asked to increase results, whether that's sell more product or get more leads or to move the needle. And again, media is not going to convert people. Media is going to make people aware of enough information to where they can convince themselves to convert. And so if we don't have something sellable, a quality product, a quality story, a differentiator, a reason to believe, the Simon Sinek why, if we don't have a good why, if you can't tell someone these shoes are going to be more comfortable, they're going to make me faster, they're going to be fashionable, you need some reason for the consumer to ultimately be like, this is something I want to dedicate some portion of my finite resources to acquiring, or this is a service that I want to share my time to learn more about and I might buy. There has to be a reason for that. There has to be something that it does. All we are as media buyers is a conduit, a messenger delivery system, this thing exists, this thing is valuable, this thing is going to make things better, this is going to improve you or solve a problem or do this. That's what media does. It is a conduit of a message. And if that message isn't clear or valuable or compelling or believable, it's not going to get you anywhere. And then we're blamed for the 10 million impressions we served that didn't get the sales. But it could be the perfect impressions and all of that, because if you're trying to sell a product for twice as much as your closest competitor, media is not going to solve that problem. I have this example. There was a client that we worked with, and it wasn't coming through, and it's because they didn't have the differentiator. And I kind of tongue in cheek, this was during COVID. I was like, look, I'll double your sales right now. Just let me claim that your product cures COVID. But of course you can't do that, right?
Yeah.
You have to have something that gives someone a reason to buy, and they didn't have it at the time. But again, people lose sight of that. Media doesn't create sales. Media conveys a message that, if it's a good message served to the right person, might result in a sale. And so it's got to all be about, what are we creating that conduit of communication to deliver? And there's a lot of questions that it's got to be a believable message. It's got to be credible. It's got to be believable. Sometimes it's got to be packaged in a really nice creative, memorable way because people are seeing ads constantly and nonstop. These are the conversations that a good media partner, a good media agency should be pushing you as a client to think about and to consider and to challenge. Again, we could be order takers. That's easy. It's easy to order take and say, oh, you want to spend another $1 million on Facebook ads? No problem. We'll do that. It's harder to be like, oh, you have another $1 million to spend. Let's talk about the best way to spend it. Here's some opportunities we've missed out on. Here's some things we haven't tested yet that can bring it in. We've maxed out on this. We need to make sure we have new creative before we spend those dollars. You should have someone that's thinking about why am I doing what I'm doing, and then making recommendations versus just order taking. Be like, yes, sir. Here's another $1 million in Facebook ads. Yes, ma'am. Here's your Facebook ads in here. I'll give you a report. Like, you want someone that's saying, great, you have more resources. Let's think about how to maximize that. Let's solve some problems with it together so that 1 and 1 equals 3 instead of always just the same thing over and over and over again.
All right, well, let's wrap up on this debate because we could go on and on and on about this. So I'm going to ask you if you can remember the last ad that you saw. Can you even remember the last ad that you...
I actually can. So I didn't think about this at first, but it was an interesting experience I had. So I watch, most of my TV is done through streaming. I don't usually do broadcast too much. And I don't really pay attention to the ads I get too much because I wouldn't say that they're really personalized to me. And you and I have joked a lot about kind of ad blocking and cookies and personalization. And if you have to see ads, why. Yep. And the experience didn't really dawn on me that I just didn't pay attention to a lot of the ads because nothing felt very, very personalized to me at any time. But I had this experience recently where I was looking at this niche travel company. It was Nomadic Backpacks. And I had just seen a bunch of them at the Meta conference that I was at. And I was like, oh, I hadn't heard about this. And I saw an ad for it. And I got interested and I bought one. And then I was looking to maybe buy another one. And then it was the first time I had ever seen this company do a streaming TV ad to me. And I noticed it. It's not a very big company. And I was like, wow, this is the first time that I truly believe that a company noticed me, understood where I was in the user journey, and delivered an ad to me, unique, personalized to my experience at a niche level. And I remember it because it was good advertising that they did. But I remember being like, why is this the first time in a long time that I'm noticing this happening? Like, what is all the other ones that are serving in the streaming that I'm doing that has gone completely ad blind that I haven't noticed, hasn't been relevant to me? How is all those ads being bought for this one to break through enough to where it actually was memorable and noticeable to me?
Very interesting. Well, I will close with the last ad that I have in my memory. Same thing, streaming TV. And apparently I'm supposed to understand Spanish and buy an ice cream through a catchy sort of pop jingle in Spanish that I think I saw the same CTV ad, I don't know, maybe 15 times in the course of a week in Spanish. I'm not a Spanish speaker. It just dawned on me that, wow, like, great ad, creative wise. The jingle like totally sticks in my head. My wife and my daughter were all like dancing to this jingle because it's really poppy and kitschy, but it's in Spanish. I don't understand what they're saying, anything about the product. And I'm thinking about how much money this advertiser is spending with their media agency that is advertising this ice cream brand in Spanish to me, which there's nothing in my profile or my data that would suggest I'm a Spanish speaker. So that's the last ad I remember because it's a great jingle, which proves that jingles and advertising still work. So kudos to the copywriters out there and the music writers that put that stuff together. So we'll leave it at that. A lot to say about the effectiveness of advertising and media's role in the entire marketing mix. We'll pick up more on the next topic on the next show. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Contrary to Popular Opinion, where we challenge you to think independently, push the limits, and take uncommon action so you can achieve game-changing results in your business and your life. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.